Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you happen to be watching this. I hope you have a wonderful day. Today, I want to, just give you a look underneath the hood to get you to see what I am thinking as I go through this ideology paper with McDonald's A Superhero's Journey. And also, I think it's going to be the connection paper that we're going to do later this semester. Why I have chosen these two assignments and what I hope people get out of those two assignments. Even if you're struggling with that first paper right now, I hope this gives you a why. And in class, I will be going through kind of a a very, very rough sample. And that very rough sample will be put on Brightspace um, underneath the ideology paper assignment. So if you want to look at that rough sample and you're not in class, that'll be a place to go. As always, I'm not trying to make a buck. I'm not a professional YouTuber. I'm just trying to help my students write a little better, learn a few things. This video is not monetized, so all of the images and all of the quoted text are used for educational purposes. This is Comp 104, Critical Writing at Mount Marty University. Under the course description, it talks about students developing the ability to read critically, to reason, and to write critical, persuasive prose. And it talks about a formal research paper. The asterisk is there to talk about the fact that the definition of reason is to think in a logical way, stolen from the Britannica.com from their dictionary. So there's this link in the course description about writing and thinking. Thinking, however, causes problems. As Alan Jacobs says, thinking troubles us, thinking tires us, it forces us out of familiar, comforting habits, it complicates our lives, sets us at odds, or at least complicates our relationships with those we admire, love, or follow. Thinking causes problems. But thinking is also very necessary, and I hope that the next few slides, as I go through this thing, help us all get to the point that even though thinking might be a problem, the answer is to not, or is to avoid the temptation to not think. We all have this determination, according to Jacobs, and I think he's correct, to not think, to avoid thinking. But I believe that what we need to do is avoid that temptation. For this class, my core beliefs are writing is thinking. To think well, one needs to read and write well. And to write well, one needs to think well. In other words, all of them, writing, reading, and thinking, are linked. Perhaps, and those of you who had me last semester will, understand, perhaps I should have just put this slide right up there at the beginning. Writing is thinking, and thinking is hard work. It is succinct. It is much more concise than everything I put together in the previous two slides, and it probably makes the same point. The problem I guess I have is I'm not sure why Lewis Black looks like he's having a mugshot here, but he certainly seems to. About a year ago, I listened to a podcast, What Should I Read Next? And Anne Vogel and Jeff Speck were discussing Jeff Speck's book. And Speck made a couple of comments, and Anne responded to him. And I have a couple of the highlights here. The biggest thing you do is to stop, observe, and then explain to others what you're looking at. That's not just the biggest thing as a city planner. That is the biggest thing for each and every communicator. You stop, you observe, and then you explain to others what you're looking at. You sometimes have to make connections. You sometimes have to make analogies. But you have to explain what you're observing. That is what communication is. The message that you're sending is a message of observation, whether it's the internal observation of what you're thinking or the external observation of what you're seeing. And people, according to this, don't want to look or don't look. They aren't in the habit. And he goes on to say that for him, you don't necessarily see something fully until you try to replicate it on a piece of paper. And for him, writing it on a piece of paper involves drawing. So you don't really see the bird until you try to draw the bird. My artistic skills are horrendous, and so I have a different option. He says he's getting in the weeds, but Anne Bogle and I disagree. For Anne and I, the best way to look and the best way to think is to write. Observation, looking, and thinking boil down to writing. So when we're talking about this class, it's observing, it's thinking about what we've observed, and it's writing it down. And it's also writing down what we've observed in order to think about it. Speck goes on to say that great writing is great thinking, and great thinking is often great observations. I started the class with a list of maxims. I probably should add this as another maxim to the class. Great writing is great thinking is great observation. If one is really going to communicate, one has to organize what one is thinking, and one has to observe the world around them in order to have a message that people want to listen to. Jacobs defines thinking as testing your responses, weighing the available evidence, grasping what is. So for this ideology paper, we had an ideology presented. For the purposes of this discussion, I'll call it a New Age ideology. We needed to look at all of the evidence that pointed to it being a New Age ideology, all of those quotations that he put together and strung together. And then we had to say, well, what is that exactly? How can we define it? How can we label it? And grasping implies that perhaps it's a struggle. And then we speculate as carefully and responsibly as we can about what might be. What should we do with this? Jacobs talks about when to go it alone and whom you should ask for help. For the purposes of this paper, I think the go it alone might be what are we going to throw out? And the whom we should ask for help, what should we keep? So we're going to observe what is. We're going to try to figure out what might be. And as we're doing that, what should we toss out from McDonald? And what should we keep? I'm going to boil it down again to a couple of things that the McDonald book, I hope, helps us deal with. There are complicated issues and questions, political, social, and religious, that really befuddle us and set us at odds with our fellow residents. The book says that negativity causes anger, frustration, violence. Perhaps we all believe that. I hope we all can see where that's probably true. The book then, I think, offers a solution. Perhaps that's where the thing gets very complicated as we look at the political and social and religious nature of our response to what he wrote as a solution. And it's entirely possible that we have to throw away everything he said, keep some of what he said, wholeheartedly buy into what he said. I'm not going to make that call for you. That's the call you have to make for yourself. But every bit of writing, every bit of thinking we deal with is going to eventually lead us to complicated social, political, and religious questions. And our answers might set us at odds with others, and our search for answers is probably going to befuddle us. It's going to drive us crazy. Jacobs also talks about the question of what can be done about biases, how can we improve judgments and decisions, both our own and those of the institutions we serve and that serve us. I talked a lot about looking at our presuppositions and what can we do with those presuppositions to deal with the judgments we have. I hope by now we've worked through some of that. If we haven't, I hope we can ask some questions to keep going and get some clarification. To practice for the research paper, to practice for the annotated bibliography, to practice everything else, we're going to do the podcast first, the Ellen Jacobs book, How to Think, second. We're going to have a works cited page here to let you know where the information came from. I hope this was helpful, at least at a theoretical level, about what we're trying to get done. I hope the sample, if you go to Brightspace, the sample is helpful. And for those of you not in class, the daily writing is going to be, is Jacobs right? Do people suffer from a willingness not to think? So we'll take a look at that, or a desire to not think, excuse me. A desire to not think. We'll take a look at that in the daily writing. I hope everyone has a good day. Hope to see you all in class the next class period.